Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to cover a very interesting topic, that is chat with the PDF using OpenAI assistant in the bubble. So in the market you have seen a lot of product like chat with the PDF like chatbase.com, pdf.co, io, I don't know exactly. Lot of such product, and if you ever dreamt of building the one, now your chance you can build with the bubble with a simple easy step. So let me just show you before deep diving into how you can integrate the OpenAI, but let's go how OpenAI assistant will work. So the first thing, start with the assistant. You will go to the OpenAI platform playground basically here and create the assistant here. Then when the first time user start the session, we create a thread, and then whatever the user start asking the question, you just add the message, the number of like user ask the question, you add the message. OpenAI return the response, that will add as a message. Now when user is done with asking the question, it will add into the thread, and then that thread will run that command. So that run command is happen at the OpenAI server side. Treat it as a action basically, that's taking assistant and also taking the thread what need to be performed basically. So that run will run it, and once it done, the output it return as a message. So this is the simple step. Let me just show you how exactly that done. Head over to OpenAI playground. Simply go to this platform.openai.com/assistant. Click on this create. We are building assistant directly from here. We can do that via the API also, but since we don't need to do it every time, this is a first time task. That's why we are just building it right away. But if you want to if you want to build assistant for each user, that is not necessary, I guess. So you don't need to do it. So let's say chat with PDF instruction. So this is the kind of prompt. What the prompt you want to give to this assistant? We are simply saying you are perfect. The model is like, do you want to GPT-4, GPT 3.5, whatever. Let's just use GPT 1. Now the function, that function basically, if you want to use a custom function, then you have to add it, but we don't want it. Or you want to call the external API, then you have to add your function here. Next is code interpreter. Code interpreter basically means you want to run some Python code over the user command. We don't want it. Third is retrieval. This is what we wanted. Retrieval basically extracting the information from the given PDF, images or anything. So we just enable it. We are not adding file because that file will be added dynamically by the user itself. So we don't need to add the file here. Click on simply save. It will automatically create that assistant and it gives you this ID. Just copy that ID. Now we will come back here. The first thing we have done with the assistant thing. Now the next thing we need to do is thread. But before thread, we need to create a UI such user can upload their file as soon as they want, and then they can start with. So let's do it. So we will head over to bubble. Simply add file uploader. Again, I'm not focusing on the UI part of it, but rather functionality part of it. Simply say upload. Simple put a button here that will say upload. As soon as it will go there, we will just simply add the workflow. Workflow will be, so the first workflow will be send that file to the OpenAI server. How we will do it? If you go to the documentation that OpenAI provided, if you go in the file section, open it. If you see this URL, this is the URL curl command that we need to set up in order to upload the file. Simply click on copy, go to bubble, go to plugin. We have to use, I have already set up my API key and all. So we just need to, that you can easily get from the like OpenAI dashboard. Simply delete it. Now this is, name it file upload. We don't need to pass it here since we already passing into here, private key in the header, and that is a more secure way of doing the things. Remove it. Now we need to pass header. If you go in here, okay, no, we don't need to pass any header here. We need to add parameter. First parameter is the purpose, this one. What is the purpose? If you read the documentation, there's a two purpose basically. One is fine tune for fine tuning and assistant for assistant. Since we are using that file for assistant, simply pass the assistant in the purpose. Assistant, and we need to add one more thing, that is file, and we just need to, instead of a form data, we just send file. Now just for the testing purpose, we are uploading one document. Okay, this is someone resume I have. I will just simply upload it and simply initialize. And if you see, this is what we get, like this is the ID that we got. We need to store it. And what we simply can say is save. That is perfect, and simply make it as an action. And you have to make it dynamically. So now we will add that API. So we say file upload, open API file upload, pass the, okay, one more thing we need to remember it. Whenever someone uploads the file on the file server, we never, with the URL that we got, don't have HTTPS in a starting. So we need to manually append that. So we will simply say, and pass the dynamic file name, file uploader value URL. That's the only thing. Now we need to store it. So let's suppose store in the state index, custom state. Oh, sorry, this is going to be file ID. So simply say result of one ID. So that will store the file that is uploaded on the OpenAI server. That's it. Now, if you go to here, we have uploaded the file. Now we need to start the thread as soon as user start asking the question. So we need to make some UI kind of it. So we will drag the input box so that user can enter it. Here user will enter their question. Now we will just drag the button and simply say answer me. As soon as, this is where user will enter their question. As soon as user click on ask me button, we need to first create a thread. For the each user session, we need to create thread. So if user is asking like again message, we don't need to start the thread again. We can use that same thread. But first, okay, if you see, this is the thread will consist of list of messages, and yeah, that's the thing. So we will just copy that curl command, again go to plugin, create thread. Since we will, oh sorry, we can simply paste it. Simply say create thread. OpenAI gives you curl call, it's better to simply post it. If you again go to, this is post call. Need to make it post. Okay, we don't need it. We already have, this is perfect, this is perfect. Now we need to pass the message, and that message is list of message on the key of messages. So what we will do, simply, okay, the first message, while creating a thread, the first message that we want to edit, tell OpenAI use the user file. Since we uploaded all the files, now we need to just pass the file ID in the message. How we will do that? If you just expand that, each message object consists of 4 things: role, that is user, because user is asking. Again is content, what is the content, and third is file ID here, and that is the array of text. So here we need to pass the file IDs. So what we will do, simply paste this. Here we are passing array of messages, but in the array of message we only pass one object, only this object. And that will have a role is user, that is fixed. Content is also fixed. This is fixed for the first time because the first action, the first message is going to be inform OpenAI, okay, this is the file ID you need to operate on. So we just need to pass the file ID. File ID we will just copy it from here and pass it here, make it dynamic and initialize it. If you see in the response we get a thread ID. We also store that. So again here, whenever someone asks message, simply say create thread. Pass the, okay, just go again. This is private, you don't need it. Just pass the custom state, the dynamic thing. So that is index file ID. Perfect. Now we will store the thread ID also. So that will result on thread ID. Perfect. Now if you again come here, we are done with the thread. Now we need to pass the user message as a message. So for that we need to call the API create message. So if we again go to the documentation and click here message, and this is the API for create message. So what we will do, simply go to plugin, again the API call, that is collapse, say create message. This is private, we don't need this. Private, perfect. So here this is your dynamic message will go. So we will say content, and this, what is the summary of the file, and here the thread ID we need to pass thread ID. We just make it dynamic thread ID. Okay, now in the step here we just got a thread ID, just copy that, pass here. Okay, just initialize the call. If you see, we have created the message. This is the message value that got. Perfect. Now again come back to here. We already created assistant. We already uploaded the file. We already created thread. We already added the user message. Now time to run it. How? Okay, before even running it, we just need to set up the workflow that will say, okay, that will just send create message. Okay, will be result of an ID, thread ID, and this is the user, whatever the user input it, user enter the question, value trimmed. Okay, now we need to run it. So to run the any assistant, we need to call this post API create run. Okay, just copy that curl, again go back to plugin, click here. Now this will say create run. Okay, here we need to pass the dynamic thread ID. Again we will do that thread ID. We don't need this, we just make it private. Here we need to pass the assistant ID. Perfect. Okay, the thread ID in our case is this one. Now the assistant ID. Assistant ID, if we go on the, this is the assistant ID. Just pass it here and click on reinitialize. If it is everything is perfect, we got ID, that is run ID. You can even store it. Perfect. Now we again set up in a workflow. Create message is done. Now we say create run. Pass the thread ID, that is result one of the thread ID, and then assistant ID is, we are not, since we are static, so we don't pass it. Now what is the output of that question that user asks, how that is done. So for that, we need to set up one API that is a list of messages. Basically return every output in the message. So, and we can even override our assistant while creating a run. We can override all our model and instruction and everything, but we don't need to. That's why we don't pass it. Here we will say list of messages. Okay. Okay. So now we will go again here, upload that. We will say create message. Oh, sorry, lift message. Because run will return their output in the message, and we are not keeping as a data. We will keep as an action. I will tell you why. Thread ID. Just make it private. Oh, sorry. Just remove that. Make that private. Make that private. Yeah, that's it. We need to check the thread ID. This is thread ID. If you see, we have asked what is the summary of that file. It returned the summary of that PDF file that is attached. That we need to show it. And so I think that is more than perfect. Now we need to show the list of messages into the repeating group. So we will say repeating group, drag the repeating group. So Assistant API works little bit different what ChatGPT streaming, ChatGPT response works. In the ChatGPT or streaming thing is simple. You ask the question and immediately stream the response or return your response after some time. But here, it basically add that response into the list of messaging, and you need to keep polling that API to actually see if there is a new input or not. So we will simply just set up the repeating group. Say repeating. Okay, now what we say, we will have one button that say when to start the polling. Poll message. Yes or no. By default, we keep it no. No. As soon as user asks the question, we start polling it. So we will say set state. Poll message. Yes. And as soon as we get the response, we need to keep polling. We need to do every 5 seconds. Instead of 5 seconds, we will simply say 3 seconds. And only when index of poll message is yes. So it will just fetch the data. How? Call the API lift message. Pass the thread ID. Thread ID is our index.thread ID. And display data in repeating group. Result of 1. Check. Sorry, data. Yes. And now just drag that current message content first item text value. Perfect. Now we need to just run it. Hopefully it is run in just a one time. First, we will upload the PDF. Simply say upload PDF. We've done. Now we will enter say, can you give me summary of the file? Simply say ask me. And wait for some time, it will automatically see. This is the message that automatically figuring out. So these are the two messages that we added. Now the third message also there. Okay, now you can see this is the third response we got it. It is truncated because of the text element that we use. This PDF appears to the resume of a person and all. You can ask again question. But so that is how you can set up the chat with the PDF. One thing is you need to keep in mind. Whenever someone click on this answer button, you don't need to create the thread again. If you already have that thread, so in my case, I'm just storing into index, thread id is empty only when call it, and same here, if it is empty, otherwise just create the message and get the data. That's the only thing you need to change. I hope this video you are able to build the product, and if you have any question related to Google API Assistant or something, just message me in the comment section. I'm happy to help you.